It was the night before camp was to begin, sleepaway camp. The head counselor was speaking to his staff, and he told them that tomorrow morning the buses are going to arrive. There are going to be 3 different groups of campers coming off this bus. The first group of campers are going to be high-fiving each other, fist-pumping each other, full of smiles, running to their bunk. The next group of campers come off the bus, a little bit more calm, also have smiles on their faces, conversing with their friends, and they're walking to the bunk. And then you got the third group of campers, those who have sad faces, no one to talk to. They get off the bus, they find a rock, and they sit down and wonder, what in the world am I doing here? That's called a homesick boy. I want you to find that boy. Approach him. Take your hand and put it around his shoulders. And say, let's walk to the canteen and I'll buy you a Danish. The next morning, the buses arrive in camp, and sure enough, first group of campers come off, high-fiving, fist-pumping, running to the bunk. Next group comes off, friendly, happy, go lucky. And then the third group of kids come off, sad, despondent, moves to the side, sitting on a rock. Why am I here? One counselor finds the boy. He walks over to him, puts his hands around his shoulders, walks him to the canteen, and buys him a Danish. That night, this counselor goes to his head counselor and he says, I want to tell you something. I listened to what you told me. I found the boy and I bought him a Danish. Head counselor was so proud of him. The counselor says, I just want to ask you something. You seem so passionate about it. Why? He says, I'll tell you. 30 years ago, I was that boy. I was that homesick boy. And someone put their hand around my shoulders and bought me a Danish. Counselor says, who was that? I want to know who it was. He says his name was Rabbi Eisenman. Says, you have any contact with him? Says, sure. He says, can I call him? Absolutely. Gave him his number. I called up Rabbi Eisman. I told him the story. I said, Rabbi Eisman, I want to know who did that to you. He says, I'll tell you. He says, I was in camp and a fellow comes into camp to visit his father, who was the resident Rav of the camp. And he was coming to visit his father, the Rav, the Rebbe. He comes through the camp and he sees that I'm sitting on a rock all by myself, despondent and sad. He comes over to me and he puts his hands around my shoulders and he says, let me buy you a Danish. You know who that was? Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky. He was visiting his father, Rav Yaakov. Now you're not going to call Rav Shmuel and ask him who did it to him. And you're not going to ask Rav Shmuel if he remembers the story. Because he doesn't. Because Rav Shmuel does this all the time. This is the trademark of Rav Shmuel. Empathy, sympathize, care, concern. Roya. He's the Roya of the generation.